Okay, so it has been a hot minute since I've done a GoXLR tutorial, but here we are. So I'm not going to have any sort of background music or anything going just because I want you to be able to hear the microphone as best as you can. So just to let you know, I am using a Rode NT1 going straight into GoXLR, nothing in between. I will say that because the Rode NT1 kind of requires a shock mount, that this like ball thing here, although there's not a whole lot of them left, I think they're going out of stock eventually, is really good to have on a boom arm of any sort because it really allows you to get it in pretty much the perfect spot, no matter what you're doing. So highly recommend getting one of these. Unfortunately, there's not really anything else like it, and I don't really know why. You can get ones that have like the 3/8 inch threading and everything like that, but this is the only one that actually has this threading. So that's what I would recommend if you're going to be using it, because it's really stable. It does not move once you turn this little knob, and yeah, it is for sure, I would say, a necessity. But now let's get into the GoXLR. So right now, this is my kind of default profile. I have two, so this is the no noise gate one, and then I have the noise gate one as well, which really, I would say if you're going to be recording in OBS and you're not streaming, I would not use a noise gate. I wouldn't do it. And the reason for that is because in post, you can always put a noise gate, but if you are talking or something and that noise gate's maybe just a little bit too high, there's no way to fix that once it's been recorded that way. So I would say if you're just recording and not doing anything else, open mic, you don't want a noise gate. If you're streaming or maybe doing something else like that, then I would probably recommend using a noise gate, unless you know that you don't have to worry about any sounds or anything like that coming through the microphone, or you just have a really quiet room. Things like that are just not good to have in a stream. So this is the kind of my main profile here. So I don't have any of this. Don't worry about this right now. So the equalizer. This is the main thing that I see a lot of people screw up, and even I had this kind of messed up in the past. So I thought to have a lot of warmth, a lot of like bass to your voice, and for it to sound good, you had to like crank these guys up and just like make it bassy as hell. No. You don't want to do that. That's a very bad idea, because all it's going to do is just really make your recording hard to listen to. What you do want to do is, yes, you do want it to sound nice, but you also want it to be intelligible. So you want people to actually be able to hear what you're saying. So if your recording is just full of bass, then that's all people are going to get. And so like my very first SM7B tutorial had that all wrong. I had boosting down to like 50 hertz. It was way too low. And then the problem that I had was plosives, for obvious reasons. That's kind of where those plosives sit, are down in those low bass frequencies. So by cutting off at about 50 hertz, it depends on your voice. If you go up to 60 hertz or 70 hertz, you might have more of an impact on the actual lower range in your recording. I would say try and pick one that doesn't affect it too much, but is at least 50 hertz. I wouldn't go any lower. 60 or 70 you could start cutting, but if I cut here, like it does cut more of that warmth down there, and I kind of want to have just a little bit of that, because that helps just kind of bring it a little bit more forward in the recording. So basically through here, kind of mostly flat. I take a little bit out in the mid, and then a little bit out in the 2 kilohertz range. The 1 kilohertz is good to boost a little bit, because that does increase the actual being able to hear what you're saying. So that does help, not too much, because then it makes it really nasally. And then I don't boost at the 8 kilohertz, so that's the reason I have the enable fine tune turned on, is to be able to do 10 and 16, because anything below that, it starts to sound really gross. It's like not a very clean high end. So 10 and 16K seems to be a good amount because it does get that high end. It does get that a bit more of an airiness, but it does help with the actual being able to hear the words. So all this I would try mess around with a little bit. And just for reference, this is what the stock or just like flat EQ sounds like. It's really not that much different. It does have more in kind of that sub bass area, but like overall that's fairly similar. And I didn't change the sound a lot because with this microphone particularly, it suits my voice really well because of the much cleaner high end. Whereas like dynamic mics tend to really make it like shh sound with any of my S's or anything like that. It doesn't make it sound great. So I'm going to switch it back. And now we're back on this EQ. So now the compressor. The compressor is kind of tied to your gain. So I have my gain at 27 dB. Now that's not that high, but it's also not too low. So if you're someone that isn't terribly loud, like you don't get loud that often, I would recommend turning the gain up because you want to have enough gain here to where you don't go more than like 10, 12 dB on this makeup gain, because this adds hiss. It does. And I try to keep it below 10 because anything above that, it really does not sound good at all. So it adds a like an electronic hiss to the sound. And that was also one of the mistakes I made with the SM7B, was not giving it enough initial gain, and it kind of didn't sound amazing. So 27 dB of gain, and right now I'm probably like 4 or 5 inches away from the microphone capsule, and this is how it sounds. And it does go up into the good range. You kind of want it, if you're talking not super forward, you don't have to worry about it going in here. You kind of want the loudest parts of your talking to be up in this area, but I wouldn't recommend anything beyond that, because when you get loud, it will peak. It will. But if that's not something that you do very often, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if you're someone that screams and yells a lot, definitely take this down. And especially if you're going to be using a noise gate, that extra hiss from the makeup gain is not going to be very noticeable. It's one thing to think about. So the threshold I have at -18. I have the makeup gain at 8. And you can see here on my levels that basically I'm always in the yellow. I occasionally go up above the -10. But this red area, realistically for a recording, this is where your voice would want to be hitting. But that's why in post, you'd add a limiter to like -6 dB or something right around here, and then just boost it up so your peaks peak at -1. Now we can't do that here, unfortunately, because the way everything captures, you kind of would get more crackling and stuff like that. You don't want to do that. So it'd just be easier to do that in post. And for streams, this is perfectly fine. This is plenty loud for a stream. Basically, everyone on Twitch, YouTube, whatever that's streaming that has good audio, this is where their audio levels are going to be peaking, or about in this range. Now, for me, another thing to think about is you don't want to overdo the compressor. So if you're someone that moves around a lot and is not always in front of the microphone, you don't have very good mic technique, or you just don't pay attention to it, then turning it up a little bit more, like so you would turn down the threshold and bring up the makeup gain by a couple notches or whatever, that's okay. That's fine. But you don't want to just compress the living hell out of it, because it actually becomes kind of graining on the ears to listen to for long periods of time. So yeah, I wouldn't do that. Ratio, I'd put this anywhere between 3.2 to 1, 4, and 5.6. If you're someone that definitely gets loud a lot, 5.6 might be a bit better. I generally like a bit more of a natural dynamic range in my voice, in my recordings and stuff that I do. So I like to keep it a little bit lower. Plus, I'm just recording, so I don't really have to worry about streaming or anything like that. The attack, I basically always keep on 2. I wouldn't bring it down to here because something about it makes it sound really bad. And I don't know if you can hear the difference, but you can tell, like, it doesn't get any louder than this no matter how loud I talk. But if I go, ooh, comparatively to ooh, there's a little bit of like popping or like a tiny little bit of crackle that happens from that really fast attack. So 2 milliseconds is fine. That's perfectly fine. Now the release is something that colors your voice more than most people think. So if you were to bring the release up to something pretty slow, so like let's just say 680 milliseconds. One thing you can notice is that the voice sounds a bit more dampened. It sounds a bit more compressed overall. So what's happening is my vowels, which are generally the loudest parts of someone talking, excuse me, my vowels are the loudest part. So the consonants, the C's, the T's, the S's, the things like that, because it's compressing and it takes 680 milliseconds to uncompress, essentially, the consonants are not as loud. Whereas if you were to bring it down to like something really fast, like say like 45, 55, you can tell that those consonants are a lot more noticeable. And another thing you might be able to notice is there's a bit more of room reverb, which is not good. You don't want to have that. So when I go bop, bop, or my phone goes off, there is more reverb. However, I do think that it can get more details in your voice. And if you're someone that, like me, that their consonants are not very loud to begin with, it's better to put it a little bit lower than higher up. So I keep mine at about 140 to 170, mainly just because of that room reverb thing. So like with the 170, it's not as noticeable with the room reverb because the reason that the fast release was picking it up so much is that it quickly uncompressed. So it heard the microphone was able to pick up the quieter stuff still bouncing around the room, but turning up the release allows that to dissipate before it uncompresses. So really, really strange the way that works. So if you're someone that has a room that has a lot of hard walls and like floors, you don't have carpet or anything to absorb the sound, bringing up the release would really help with that that reverb that goes around the room, because that's not good to have in a recording. A little bit's okay because, like, you know, you're not in a studio or something, you're not making like an album for anything, so having a little bit's okay, but you don't want it to be just terrible. So the de-esser is the last thing. So a lot of people tend to like hear their S's and then they go, oh, that sounds bad. That sounds bad. I don't want to have that. Well, the problem is with the de-esser, if you turn it up, say to 100, now you might be able to hear that the S's and stuff like that is not as forward, but that also reduces the detail in your voice a bit more. Whereas if, like, for example, this is at 0. Now this is a bit too much. Those S's and stuff are really harsh. That's not great to listen to, even in my headphones hearing it real time. It's not good. So I tend to put it at about 30. 30 seems to be a good spot because you still want to have those sounds. You don't want to get rid of them 100%. You just don't want them to be the main thing that you're hearing all the time. So that's definitely what you want to do. So with the noise gate, here's something. The noise gate generally I put at -48. That's something that depends on how loud you are. It depends on what your room's like, how much extra noise you have. I would say overall, it's probably better to have your attenuation at 100 because if you're going to use a noise gate, there's obviously something you don't want people to hear. However, it does make it harder of a transition between when you're talking and when you're not. So like right there, you basically got no sound whatsoever coming through your speakers, your headphones or whatever. So it does make it a bit more of a transition. So the attack is like 10 to 20 milliseconds is fine. The longer you put it, the easier it will open, or the longer it will take to open, so it'll be more gradual. But also you want to, when you talk, you want it to open fairly quickly. And then the release is something that is also dependent, because you could have a really fast release, which basically cuts off whatever you're saying as soon as you stop making any volume. It cuts off really fast, and you don't want to go really low, because then you basically start cutting in and out, and it, this doesn't sound good at all. And then another thing is, like, if you go with a really long release, so basically a second and a half here, it is a bit more gradual, and it does sound a bit more natural, because once you start talking, it will basically keep open until you're done saying whatever sentence you're trying to say. And it does sound a bit more natural, and it's a little bit easier than to manage than a just straight up open mic. But also, again, you're having that gate there for a reason, because if there's obviously something going on in your room, or an appliance is making noise that you don't want to hear all the time, or your keyboard or your mouse. So if it's open for a whole second and a half after you stop going through this threshold, then it's going to pick up all those sounds for a whole second and a half. So I would say anywhere between 200 and probably 500 is probably the longest release that I would do. And the reason for that is, like I just said, you don't want it to be too quick, because you don't want it to cut you off, but you also don't want it to be too long, because you want it to block out the noises that it's blocking out, which is good. So there's a few other things in here that I've put in that are mic profiles and whatnot that are just kind of fun things. Like I have my my overly bassy one, which is just kind of funny. And see, now you can hear the you can hear that hum. I think that's the hum from my fridge that's in here. But like, that's way too much voice, or way too much bass, sorry. So yeah, I think that's really everything. If you've been paying attention to the audio meter, for example, you'll see that I have 4 here. I believe there's, an additional one there. So the reason for that is, okay, that just changed sizes on me for some reason. So the reason for that is, in OBS, I have a bunch of different audio devices, so that in the event that I was going to edit the recording, I have my main broadcast mix as audio track 1. And then I have chat mic, or whatever my microphone is, as 2. And then system, chat, and music is 3, 4, and 5. And so you can do that because, well, the reason you would want to do that is, if I was going to actually edit the recordings and everything, I wouldn't use the first one. And that's just there as kind of like a failover. If for some reason the others don't, I generally mix it fairly okay on my GoXLR. But you would basically just use the individual ones as they are. So you would bring down system, you'd bring down chat a little bit in music or whatever you're doing, and then you would mix it all, because at that point it gives you the most amount of freedom once you get it into an audio editing software that accepts all the audio tracks, which like DaVinci Resolve does, Adobe Premiere, as far as I know, all the major ones do, so you really shouldn't have to worry about that. But you can, like I said, add that noise gate to your chat mic. You can turn up and down your system volume, turn up and down your teammates or whatever. Anything like that you can do in post, and it's best to do this because, like, maybe for example, you're cursing, or your people in Discord are cursing, or whatever it is, and you don't want that to be in your video. Well, it's kind of abrupt when you add a bleep or something over the top of the entire audio that's in your recording. So it would basically add a bleep over your Discord, over your system, anything else if you cursed. Whereas if you just bleeped on this one track, all these are still fine. And that's the best way to do it. So just a little tip to throw out there. So you would just click advanced audio properties, and then this is kind of how I have it set up. So like this, don't worry about this check mark and this whole thing. But yeah, so that's kind of how it works for me. And then in the settings, you just would go to output, recording, and then it'd just be, you'd check all the audio tracks that you actually want to record. And then also, yeah, definitely MKV, and this is kind of my other settings in here. Works very good for me. And yeah, so it is cool. So anyways, I hope this helped anyone. If anyone's curious, I also use the, what is it, the SM, whatever the, I can't see the box. It's sitting over there, but I can't see what it is. Oh, the SMR shock mount, which is the one that actually has the metal grill. Right now, I'm not using the metal grill, which is the advantage of not having all this bass down here up, is because when the flow system stuff would be a lot more noticeable on this setup, which is just like a smaller pop filter around the capsule itself. And the reason that I do that is that the metal grill filter is kind of big. It kind of gets in the way a little bit. So this is, I have to be a bit more conscious about the, breaths and stuff like that. You don't want it to be on there. But overall, sounds pretty dang good. The SMR is not that much different than the SM6, I believe, that comes with the mic now. Also, I would not get the Rode NT1 5th gen. I would get the Rode NT1 6th gen, I think it is. Rode NT1. Yeah, the 5th gen. So this one, which is the one that actually has the silver and then the black, everything else, which, by the way, this is the other shock mount I was talking about. This one's good. This one's good because you can also adjust the distance of this pop filter here, and it works pretty well. I would say the actual shock mount itself is not as good as the SMR, but the SMR also has a fixed metal one in the front. So yes, so the reason I would go for the 5th gen and not the 4th gen is, one, the 4th gen is more expensive for some reason. So it's $270, and the 5th gen is $250. So it's $20 less to get this, and it's essentially the exact same thing, except you have USB as well. So inside the XLR port, there is a little Type-C port. You can plug it in via USB and use it as a USB mic. And it also has, 32-bit float digital recording. That is freaking amazing to have in that. And it's, for some reason it's cheaper. So you might as well get the cheaper one, have the exact same capsule, the exact same insides and everything if you're using for an XLR mic, but also you could use it as a USB mic. And you'd have to bring it into something like Reaper or whatever to actually use the 32-bit float, because unfortunately it doesn't work with OBS yet. But basically what it means is there's so much information being sent that it's impossible to clip the microphone. Because what you can do is if you're clipping in the like if it's going into the red or whatever inside of Reaper and you've already recorded it, you can just bring the volume down and it's not clipping anymore. Versus like a normal XLR mic or something, once it's clipped, you can't unclip it. Then this is perfect. And for like vocal recording or voiceover work or anything like that, that's super cool. And you don't even need to have an interface. You can just plug it right in and do whatever you want. It is probably the best USB mic that you can even get right now, because it's, well, besides Rode's other USB stuff, which is okay, but this is like the best USB mic that's for more vocal stuff, not like streaming. Because it doesn't have any software that you can use with it, unfortunately. But yeah, it's really good. It looks exactly like the other one, but instead of a black grill, it's a silver grill, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I would definitely, if anyone's gonna look to buy this one, don't buy it. Buy this one. It does the exact same thing and has more and is cheaper. So there's your hot tip of the day. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video or got anything interesting out of the video, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, because every once in a while I will do these just kind of based off of my findings and whatnot, and I might be even releasing more stuff. I also, my friend, we've been kind of doing more games and stuff, and actually I'm going to be moving in with him, so it'd be kind of cool to post some stuff or do some live streams or whatnot. So yeah, if you like the video, then like the video, subscribe, and then if you ring that bell icon, then you will be notified when I upload a new video, which is not very often, but they do have generally a lot of good information in them that a lot of other videos don't have. So take that as you will, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. All right, bye-bye.